Good morning and happy PSD CSD reporting period. My name is Kim York and I will be your host for the next hour as we go over the PSD CSD reporting and updates. So let me introduce you to our team. We have Kristen Lambert, who is our team lead and technical analyst, myself, and Kathy Pelletier, who's our Tyler Technologies vendor partner. And to do a little bit of housekeeping this morning, you have your Q&A at the top of the page. You're welcome at any time to add any questions to that Q&A that you would like. Kristen Lambert will be manning the Q&A. And I'd first like to kind of let you get used to that Q&A and let us know if you're a new person to PSD CSD reporting. Kind of go to the Q&A and give me a yes, heads up that you're new, and kind of keep an eye out if you need any extra assistance through this reporting period. I'd be glad to be of assistance to everyone, but especially the new people on board. And there will be stops during the presentation for questions. And of course, at the end, we'll have time for questions as well. I did want to let you know that with the updates to these programs, the PSD CSD EERP guides are updated with these updates, and we'll be going over that through the presentation, and they are posted. So any of these updates are now in the guide. So if you have any old PSD CSD guides, it might be a good idea to go ahead and shred those and pull new guides for this year. This webinar will be recorded and emailed along with a copy of the presentation, usually within a day or two after the presentation is over. So the updates that we're going to discuss today with the PSD CSD programs are available as of August. They were available as of August 1st, 2025, and in Tyler Deploy version 2024.6.0.0. We just had a handful of districts who hadn't updated through Tyler Deploy since August 1st. I did reach out to those districts and they were going to be updating, so everybody should be ready for these program updates. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off for the time being. And we're going to start with the EPSB ID import program. We're going to talk about an overview of this process and updates to the program. So the EPSB ID import report builds a file containing teacher EPSB license numbers to upload to Enterprise ERP. And this next bullet is where we have the change in the program. Previously, it would match to the Social Security number and the date of birth as it was imported into EERP. It will now match the last name in Employee Master and the date of birth in Employee Master to import properly. It will import the associated EPSB ID numbers into the state ID field on the Employee Master. And if more than one employee has the last name and date of birth, an error message will be given, duplicate name and date of birth. And as it was with the Social Security number and date of birth, it was extremely rare. I think we only saw that one time. So that should be rare. But in the event that should happen, you would just simply need to manually enter the EPSB ID number into that state ID field. So this is just kind of a graphic. I'm a visual person. So this is just kind of a graphic to kind of give you an idea of how this process works. So you'll actually start in Infinite Campus and you'll pull the validation report. The validation report is what you use to make corrections in Infinite Campus for the items that you see on that report. You will then pull the EPSB ID report and save that report to your computer. Something I'll probably mention again, but the validation report and EPSB ID report are two completely different reports. You want to make sure that what you're pulling into EERP is the EPSB ID report. The validation report is simply there for you to make corrections. So then once it's in EERP, you upload the EPSB ID report into EERP. You'll check any report errors that you may get. You'll make manual corrections if needed, and then run the PSD report and look for error 50. And we'll talk about error 50 more as we go along. So error code 50 is required. The EPSB ID number is required for PSD reporting. And if you run your report and you've done everything you're supposed to do and you still don't have an EPSB ID number for someone, you'll need to manually enter that, because all employees on the PSD report are required to have an EPSB ID number. So finding the EPSB ID number in KEX. So in the past, if an employee had applied for an EPSB ID number, we were using a series of 9s if they had not received that number yet. But currently, as soon as a person applies for the EPSB ID number, that number is assigned to them and in the KEX system. So if you don't have that number, you'll need to go to the KEX system actually to pull that number. So in the KEX system, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to search in their profile to find the individual. You are going to then, once you find them, go to reports and generate your reports. You are going to pull it as a .csv file. You'll export it to an Excel file and expand the columns so that you can see the EPSB ID numbers and other information, and validate or enter any missing EPSB ID numbers into Infinite Campus. So you'll use this as actually a way to put it into Infinite Campus if you don't have it as well. And so the KEX system is not something that my team works with. And if you have any questions on that, you'll reach out to Tessa Harris and you'll have her email address. It'll be in the presentation once you receive that as well. And a question that I get is, are EPSB numbers required for classified staff? And no, they are not required for classified staff. They may have one. They may have had a position in the past where they needed an EPSB ID number, and it may be in EERP. It's just not required for them if they are on the CSD report. So let's get started with the CSD report. So an overview here is that the report produces an electronic file of classified employee information required to be submitted to KDE no later than October 1st. It's produced using employee data from Employee Master, Employee Job Salary Records, and Job Class Master Records. So criteria for an employee to generate into the CSD report. And this doesn't mean that you can't add someone or take someone away, but when you're actually generating this report, what it's going to pull are people with summary class codes that fall between 7,000 and 7,999, and that they have a group BU that contains CLAS or RCLA, and that they are hired as of September 15th of the fiscal year. So now we're going to talk about just the updates to the CSD program. So first, we've added object code 0133. It will be added as a valid CSD object code, primarily for speech pathology stipends. That was the number that DDS gave you. That was the object code assigned for speech pathology stipends. There have been times when 0133 was used by districts because it didn't pull in originally, for some miscellaneous job salary records that you didn't want to pull into the CSD report. So you might just watch for that object code for people that maybe you didn't want to pull into the CSD records, and you can simply just delete them out before you create your electronic file. We'll talk more about that later. And Error 11, which was previously if you mark the 2 or more races box, and anything related with race and ethnicity came under Error 11. And in the past, you were not able to mark 2 or more races. It was not allowed. It was based on some of the organizations that they sent these reports to. They didn't want that box marked, but this has changed. And districts will now have the option to mark 2 or more records boxes, and it will appear on the CSD records as such. So you see the box to the right is showing you ethnicity and race. So ethnicity, if you mark yes, Hispanic or Latino, the same rules apply. You will mark nothing under race. But if you mark no, not Hispanic or Latino, you're able to mark as many boxes as you would like under race, and you'll get no error for that. So again, the yes, Hispanic or Latino, the rules still apply that you cannot mark anything under race. The next bullet says the electronic file will now only show the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. So again, this is to really, hide private information for employees. So everything will be hidden except for the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. And the Group BU will now be on the electronic file. So we have an update to your hybrids. I think this is going to be the most exciting update for those who have completed PSD, CSD reporting in the past. Hybrids have always been a time-consuming thing with how we had to mark them for them to pass the CSD error report. But a box has been added to the CSD records to indicate that an employee is a hybrid employee. And remember, this box is on the CSD records itself. If the box is checkmarked, this indicates Y or yes in the CSD file. If left blank, this will indicate that the employee is not a hybrid or N. So on the electronic file, it's either going to have Ys or Ns. But you want to mark this box if your employee is a hybrid employee. And it is something that you manually maintain. So you will need to manually check mark that hybrid box on the employee's CSD record if they are a hybrid. So what does this mean? No more hourly rate calculations for hybrids. And I know that this has been a point of contention for myself and the districts having to do this because most of our CSD hybrid employees are salary. So having to calculate out an hourly rate based on that was really difficult. And if you had multiple, you were having to do this for multiple employees, you will no longer have to do that. So you'll simply mark it as hybrid. And so then it will pass. It'll show on your error report on EERP that you have it, but it's going to pass. It's going to allow you to submit. And then DDS will check it once you submit it to SEEK to them, and they will look for that hybrid, and they will pass it on the SEEK side as well. So this is the first year. We may have, a little bit of I don't anticipate any problems. We've tested and tested, but it's going to be interesting to see it go through the CSD season. So you're still going to get the warning at the end of your report to check the setup of hybrid employees, just to make sure that you've looked for any hybrid employees that you have out there. And that can include your Frisky directors, your CCLC directors, your finance officers, your school nurse. And the note here is something that I'll repeat several times as we go along, is that hybrid employee is someone who it typically has a salary, they typically pay into TRS, but they are not required to have a teaching certificate. So they would not apply, they would not be on the PSD report, because the PSD report are for employees who are required to have an EPSB ID number for their job position. So allocation codes, we're going to start out with that within CSD. Allocation codes and FTE are the two areas where I get the most in regards to questions. Sorry, just one second, I need to change something. Okay, so allocation codes, we want to kind of think of allocation codes as GL codes. If somebody is working at different locations, they're obviously going to be paid from different sources of money. So when you think of allocation codes, it's really best to think of that as kind of like GL codes. So our example here, and I'll have a graphic to follow this that will help explain it a little bit better, but an employee performs a single job at several locations. They will have multiple CSD records due to the allocation code set up on the job salary record. An example here is that an instructional assistant works equally at 4 elementary schools. There will be 4 CSD records for base pay with FTE of 1 on each record and an allocation of 25. If the contract is for 186 days, the contract days reported on each CSD record will be 46.5. The base pay records for a single job class code will always be 1 for allocation, and the days will always add up to the standard contract. And this is good, just if you have these situations arise when you're doing CSD, just pull out these these slides and kind of pin them up. The graphic in the next slide, I think, will help more than anything. But the FTE percent is to be 1 on all records, because a person can't be more than one job, one full-time job. That's full-time equivalent is what FTE stands for, and you can't have more than one full-time position. So the annual salary, reference salary, and days are prorated by the allocation percentage. So I think that this graphic will help a little bit. So we have Betsy here, and if you've been in any of my past PSD, CSD presentations, you know Betsy. So Betsy is, she's working at 4 different locations with one job. It's simply one job as an instructional assistant that she does as 4 different locations. So as you can see, she has 4 records because she's going to have 4 different GL codes on her job salary record. And her allocation is 25 because it's 4 locations. 100 divided by 25 is 4. And her FTE is still going to be 1 on each record because she's only one full-time person. The days are the contract days divided by that allocation percent. And when you divide 186 days out by the allocation percent, you come to the 46.5 days. So FTE, so this is the full-time equivalent. We want to remember that a person can only be one full-time person, and that'll help you understand this a little bit better. So employees who perform multiple jobs will have multiple pay records with an FTE of less than 1 on each record. An employee is an instructional assistant half-time and a supply service aide half-time. Each position will be 0.50. Together, of course, that adds up to 1. And if the same employee was an instructional assistant at 2 different schools, the instructional assistant position would have an FTE of 0.5 and have an allocation of 50 for each location. So this is, again, I'm kind of a visual person, so this is a graphic to kind of help you understand this a little bit better. So Bradley is an instructional assistant and he's a supply service aide. This is at the same location, so he's 0.50 on each of those positions. Together they equal 1 FTE. And we could take that a step further. And remember, FTE is their full-time equivalent and allocation is their GL codes. So hopefully that'll help you understand this a little bit better. And again, this is a regular occurrence that I see at districts. So pull this slide out and pin it up if you need to. But Bradley is an instructional assistant and a supply service aide at 1 location. But the instructional assistant position, he does at 2 locations. So that's going to bring allocations or GL codes back into play. So at the position of instructional assistant, he's at John Doe Elementary and Mary Doe Elementary. His allocation is going to be broken down 2 to 50-50 for the 2 different locations. So hopefully that's clear as mud, but use this graphic if you need to when you're doing your CSD reporting. So this is simply your path to generating the CSD report and the screen that you will see when you do so. And you'll choose Generate from the ribbon. You'll choose Define and enter the information for the current year and hit Accept. And these slides and the guides are updated with the current year and the effective dates. Use those dates as you're going forward. When you start to do your CSD reporting, it's going to default to where you were set last year. So 2025 is probably going to be what is appearing. But you want to change that to 2026 and effective 7/1/2025 because that's when this fiscal year actually got started. And creating the electronic file. So once your CSD records have been reviewed and edited, a file must be created for submission to KDE. You'll do a find on all of your records, then select the electronic file button. A CSD file will automatically be created and you'll see the file name at the bottom, and you'll submit that to KDE by October 1st. And we'll talk a little bit more about the submission as we go along. But do remember, and I may have this in another slide, but I want to be sure to mention that if you make any corrections to your CSD records, any manual corrections, do that and don't regenerate. Like once you have made manual corrections, if you regenerate, it's going to take everything back to where it was. So you'll want to make those manual corrections and then hit your electronic file. So here are some of the most common CSD errors that we see. And, you know, again, pulling off this presentation, having it when you're running this report, some of the most common things you'll be able to see here. There'll be graphics to things that'll help you, but this presentation is pretty good to help when you're actually going through this process. So the error, a CSD error 6.50 is an invalid object code on the CSD record. The problem here is that an object code on a classified group BU summary class in the 7,000 range does not contain the appropriate object code. So valid object codes are the 0130, 31, now 0133, newly added, and 0160. And you'll see the graphic in the center of the slide, and that graphic, along with the ones for PSD you'll see later, all of these are in your PSD and CSD guides. I highly recommend that one page. Take it out, tape it up, put it somewhere where you can see it, because 75% of the errors that we see on CSD and PSD reporting can be fixed just by looking at those grids to see that you've got everything correct. So error 16 is an invalid summary class code. You see the same grid to the left that you saw in the previous slide. So both of these things you can correct just simply by looking at that grid. But the problem here is that a summary class code outside the list of valid KDE codes exists on a pay record. The correction here is to update the job class master with a valid summary class code. And you'll have a link to that guide to be able to see the allowable classification codes when you receive the presentation. But something I want to note here is that I wish it weren't an ability that districts had, but you do have the ability to go in and create a summary class code. And they're always going to be invalid because those are KDE driven. They create the summary class codes. You can't add or take away from those. The ability of the district to create a job class code is in your hands. So if you have someone who is under a summary class code and maybe they do two different things and you want to distinguish that, you can create your own district job class code for that person and match it to the summary class code. The summary class code should never be added or taken away from. Again, those are KDE driven. So error 26 is an invalid group BU job class and object code. Again, you can probably look at that same grid and see the issues that you have. The problem here is that the error will generate when an employee has an invalid combination of these items. And the correction is to simply go in and correct that on job class, on employee master or job salary records as well. So the most common warning, and remember, you can submit with warnings. And the most common one that you see with CSD is 124, which is saying that basically you don't have a finance officer listed, or any of those summary class codes that you see there, 7166, 84, 85, and 86. You need one of those on your report. You get that warning because your finance officer or any of those summary class codes may be on the CSD report. They may be on the PSD report, you know, so it's just giving you a warning to check to see if the person who fills one of those positions should be on the CSD report. So as I said earlier, this is a page that's in both your PSD and CSD guides. Print a copy of it out and just hang it up. It's going to be the handiest thing you'll ever have for looking at your mistakes for PSD, CSD. Like I said, 75% of the errors approximately can be corrected just by looking at this grid and making sure that you're following, that all of your GL codes match. So now we're going to kind of move on to the PSD report. So an overview of the PSD report is that it produces an electronic file containing your certified employee salary information to be submitted to KDE no later than October 1st. The PSD report uses data from the employee master file and employee job salary records for employees hired as of September 15th. So requirements for PSD records to be created. The employee status on employee master record must be set to active. Employee pay records must contain valid summary class codes, 0110 to 3999, or those extra duty 5000 to 5999. An employee job salary record must have a Group BU or CERT or RCER. And the accuracy of PSD data is essential as it is used to report to the federal government, KSBA, and these other government entities. So salary tables. This is, probably I would recommend where you kind of start when you start the PSD process, because the salary tables have to be submitted before you submit your PSD report. Salary tables will come first. So base pay salary tables will be submitted for comparison to the actual PSD files. And that's actually why the salary tables have to be submitted first, so that when you actually submit your PSD, it has something to compare those numbers to. The tables will be used to verify each employee's base and extended day reference salary, and that it corresponds to salary tables. So creating the salary table file. An electronic file of the Enterprise ERP salary tables will be created for submission to KDE. The file will be submitted using the Seek Data Web Submission application. In order to submit successfully to KDE, the tables must reflect the following. The naming structure must conform to KDE standards. The salary table file for the PSD submission must contain at least 40 years of data of each grade. And all tables must contain the same number of steps. An example here, if rank 1 step 1 table contains 44 steps, then all tables must contain 44 steps. So this is simply your pathway to creating the salary table file. You'll actually go into the PSD report. You'll select the salary table button on the ribbon. The salary table screen appears. You'll click search to find the appropriate salary tables by entering the search criteria into the effective day and the grade rank fields. You'll then select electronic file button from the screen. And the note here is to note the export file. You need to note, the export file name at the bottom so that you'll have that for submission. So let's first talk about the PSD program changes and updates that have been made. Again, these are in your guides, so pull the most recent guides if you can. And again, it was effective as of August 1st. And I believe of the districts that I contacted yesterday did their Tyler deploy, everyone should be ready to go with this. So if teachers are not assigned to a school location, you will now receive an error when creating the district PSD report. So previously, this was an error. It has always been an error, but it wasn't reporting on the EERP side. You were only getting this error once you submit it. And I heard so many people say, why are we not getting this error when we're actually doing our reporting versus waiting until it's submitted? Well, you won't have to ask that question anymore, because now we're going to be able to see that error in the actual EERP report of PSD. So if teachers are not assigned to a school location, you will now receive an error when creating the district PSD report. And so all of these summary class codes listed below, those particular teachers have to have a location code. It can't be 000 or 001. It has to be a school location. And my thoughts, it has been in the past that districts have said they've used the school that they were at the most as their location codes. And that location code has to be within the location field, and the org code also has to reflect that location. So you can't use 000 or 001. It has to be 010, 020, 030, but the org code also has to reflect that location. So the other changes that we made is that object code 0116 is now going to be a valid PSD object code. That again was for speech language, your speech pathology stipends. And so now that will be valid. It will pull them in with no errors. The same situation with error 11 that we have with CSD on the 2 or more races box applies exactly the same to the PSD program. And the electronic file, again, will, same as CSD, will only show the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. And again, the Group BU will be on the electronic file. So this is simply your path to generating your PSD records and the screen that you will see. You'll choose Generate and Define, enter the appropriate information for the year and choose Execute. You'll output any errors and correct them. Again, the dates for your reporting should be correct in all of the guides and on this presentation. So always watch. It's going to default back to last year when you open it up. You want to be sure to update that and change that for the current year. So resolving your PSD report errors. Errors can be resolved by correcting the job class master, employee master records, and/or employee job salary records. After errors have been corrected, the Recalc button can be selected to recalculate a single employee's PSD record. Multiple errors can exist due to a single problem. So basically, you can get an error for something simple and it'll throw off 2 or 3 other errors. And you may just need to correct one thing to correct all of those errors as you go along. The electronic file. So creating the electronic PSD file. The electronic file must be created after the PSD records have been generated. You'll do a find for all records and then select electronic file button from the PSD report screen. And after the file has been generated, the export file name will appear at the bottom. You'll want to have that for submission. So submitting, it must be submitted by October 1st, same as CSD. You'll submit through the Seek Data web submission application. You'll refer to the document, Create PSD and CSD Files for Submission, that is located in the PSD and CSD reporting section of our EERP guides. And the note here, as I mentioned earlier, as the salary table file must be submitted prior to submitting your PSD file. And if you need to submit a replacement file, let's say that you've submitted and you need to submit again, you'll need to email finance.reports@education.ky.gov, ask them to deny your original file before you can submit another file. So important items here to talk about. The retirees are always a big question when it comes to PSD reporting. So again, this is another item, another page that you can just pull out in the event that you're working with retirees and you have questions. They should fall within one of these 4 categories. Apologize, I had to get a drink of water. So the first bullet says retirees returning to work as a classified staff member, CLS or RCLA, should have a summary class code that falls in the 7,000 to 7,999 range. Second bullet says retired employees that retired paying TRS, but they return to work in a district in a classified position that requires a 4-year degree and will pay TRS are coded to the RCLA Group BU. That RCLA is important there. The third bullet is retired employees that retired paying TRS, return to work in a district in a classified position that does not require a 4-year degree and will pay CSRS are coded to the CLAS Group BU. The last one is the one that we see the most of, and the one I highlighted it because it seems to be the one that we get the most questions for. But we have retired teachers hired back in a position requiring a teaching certificate will have a Group BU of RCER. Again, that RCER is important. Should be pointed to a retired employee salary table. The rate of pay is negotiated involving maximum amounts set by TRS. It should pull into the PSD report. However, and here's what you've got to remember, the grade and step will be blank on the PSD records when records are generated. KDE does not compare the reference salary to any salary table as long as the Group BU has been set to RCER. So again, that RCER is important. So I would highly suggest you become familiar with that. So extra service pay. So certified employees who receive extra service pay must have a separate employee job salary record for each extra service job. And I misspelled that, I apologize. Extra service job salary records must reflect a job class code linked to an allowable service code. All certified extra service summary class codes are in the range of 5,000 to 5,999. So I've had districts say, well, can't I just lump them together? It's all extra service. Why can't I just put them on one job salary record? But if there are individual extra service positions, each one needs to have its own record. So certified employee job salary records for those employees who receive extra service pay must contain the appropriate object codes. And you see the list there, and we now include the 0116, which was for the speech pathology stipends. So mid-year hires, that's always a biggie. I work with a lot of districts every year on their mid-year hires. And so here are the things that you want to remember if they're working in one position. So partial year employees will be updated in the PSD file with a full year of days employed when the file is generated. And we'll see where that pulls from as we go along. So the days employed field must stay at the number of contract days the district has set for the full year of a standard certified contract. So at this point, it doesn't matter if they're mid-year, the full days need to be reported, and you'll see again where this is pulling from. So in the red, we have the reference salary field, because you have a reference salary field and an annual salary field on those records. The reference salary field must contain an amount reflective of a full year. Think of it as the salary you're referencing. Not what they're making, but just the salary that you're actually referencing for that person. It will contain an amount reflective of a full year salary as if the employee had been employed for the entire year. Now, the annual salary, this is what they're actually making. So that's the difference. The annual salary will be the salary the employee will actually receive for the number of days he or she will work. And this is where the FTE field becomes important, because this is what drives the calculation. The FTE field needs to reflect the percentage of the standard contract days the number of days the employee will work represents. So the example here is that an employee is hired after the start of the school year and will work 170 days of a 187-day contract. You simply divide the 170 by 187, and it gives you a 0.9091 FTE. And the next bullet is telling you that it has to be to the 10,000th percent. So you've got to have 4 digits after your decimal, but that will be your FTE. It's what drives all of these things that pull over to the records themselves. So the grade and step. The grade and step for employees having multiple job salary records should be the same. For hybrid employees, you want to verify that employees serving in a classified position but paying into TRS are set up with a Group BU of CLAS and object code for base pay of 0130. These employees must be reported on the CSD file, not PSD. And again, the employees that report on your PSD file, their job descriptions must say that they are required to have an EPSB ID number. And I know that some districts, they tell me that they have gotten by with it a little bit, but if you have someone on PSD that should be on CSD, but they have an EPSB ID number, so it passes, you may have a problem when it goes on into the lead reporting process. So be sure if you have someone who does not require an EPSB ID number, even if they have one, they should be reported on the CSD report. So the most common PSD report errors that we see, error code 6, which is no base pay record. The problem here is that the error test checks to ensure there is a base pay record, a 110 for all employees in the PSD report. Correction here, you just want to make sure you change it if you need to make sure that they have an 0110 record. Basically, you can't have 0111, you know, your extended days or anything like that if you don't have an 0110. Error 6.5, an invalid object code for PSD records. Again, this is going back to the same thing as the CSD records. Those graphics that that you have that you can pull out of the guide that show you how all of this matches up applies for both PSD and CSD. So you want to check to make sure the object code is a valid certified payroll object code. So error 26 is an inaccurate summary class code for the object code. Again, going back to that grid, pull that sheet out because it's going to make all of this very, very simple for you. But this error test verifies the summary class code coordinates with the valid object code. The summary class codes are set and maintained by KDE, The ranges for summary class codes along with allowable object codes are below. And then the grid below that are the number of ranges to be used when a district wants to add a new job class code along with the allowable object codes for each group. So error 44, no kindergarten instructor coded in the district. You have to have a kindergarten teacher, and you've got to have someone with that code of 2025 or you're going to get an error message. So when you get that, make sure you have a kindergarten teacher assigned. If you don't, you just need to correct it to see that you do. 2720, this is kind of the error check. Actually, the error check for CSD, I'm so glad that we're not going to have to worry about that anymore, as much anymore. If the hourly rate in CSD still doesn't work out, you may have to do some calculations, but most of the calculations for CSD we have detailed by changing the hybrids. But for PSD, you're going to get error code 2720, and it's checking the reference salary by the FTE minus the annual salary. And you're going to see that ERP will perform a calculation on the PSD record. The reference salary on the 0110, which is your base pay records, will be multiplied by the FTE, and that should equal your annual salary. An error is generated when the amount is outside of the parameter of plus or minus $25. So you'll verify that the job salary record contains a correct reference salary for 0110 based on the district salary tables submitted to KDE. Then verify that the reference salary amount listed on the PSD file agrees with the salary table. So warnings that you may have, again, you can submit with warnings. It just wants you to take a closer look at what it's asking you to do. And so most warnings regard necessary positions to be reported on the PSD report. And again, you're going to get that warning for the finance officer because it doesn't know whether you've put that person on PSD or CSD. You just want to check and make sure that you do have your finance officer on one or the other report. So now we're to the point that we can ask some questions. I haven't been able to look at the chat while I've been giving the presentation, but Kristen, do we have any questions out there, anything? Currently?
Yes, hi, Kim. We had a question here about FTEs, about will it cause an issue for the CSD if an employee has an FTE greater than 1 if they have 2 jobs, example, 0.7 bus monitor, 4 hours a day, and a 0.5 custodian, 4 hours a day.
For reporting purposes, it won't allow it. It's going to error, and they're going to have to figure that out in some other fashion, either reach out to DDS or, but it's not going to allow them to have a higher FTE than 1.
I guess in theory, that person is working overtime. I get that they kind of have 2 positions, but you could only be 1 person. So
1 full-time person. It would be overtime, but legally, you know, it should be that they're doing overtime.
So any other questions, drop them in the chat or the QA. We'll hang out here for a bit.
You're welcome,
Kim, great
Susan
presentation.
I knew that would make you more happy than anybody, but yeah, and thanks to you, we helped get that through. So we appreciate that so much.
My suggestion is, I'm not sure, Kim may have already said this, you know, you don't have to wait until September 15th to start generating these reports. Because I know you all have so much downtime to do this, you know, but you may go ahead and get started on it, generate it, see what you have so you can slowly start working on it. It's a very tight window, that couple of weeks, trying to help support everyone. So the sooner you get on that to make sure you don't have a massive amount of errors, the better. And the team box is the best way. I usually
stress that 1,000 times throughout the presentation because especially if you're new to this process, you can't officially run the report till September 15th because it is employees hired as of September 15th. But if you have errors out there for existing employees, we can get those nipped in the bud now before that reporting period ever rolls around. And especially if you're new to this reporting, this is when the season, I always say happy PSD CSD season because it's kind of before the holiday season starts, and it will start now and go through till lead reporting starts with corrections and things like that. So if you want to start looking at it now and you want some time that we can talk and look at those errors, if you have any issues, do it now. You know, it's good we can get that started, and that 2-week period will be a whole lot easier on you, me, everybody, in making sure you get those reports submitted by October 1st. So thank you, Kristen, because that's usually something I press and I fail to do that. So
no problem. And just also a reminder to send those questions to the team box. While Kim is very much the expert on PSD, CSD reporting, we both can support it. And so as we mentioned, there's 171 districts and only 2 of us. So that's why we're saying get started early and send any questions to the team box. We will send out a copy of this presentation afterwards, including a link to the recorded webcast, so you can watch that afterwards if you wanted to refresh your memory or send it to someone else in your district that was unable to attend and watch live. Let's see.
And I thank everybody for participating. And do remember, there are other reports that are due in September. So it's a busy time for everybody. So again, the earlier you can start this process and get your errors knocked out, the better off you're going to be within your district. So any other questions before we let you all go? Okay. Well, Kristen, do you have anything else you need to mention or anything?
Thank you so much, Kim.
You'll have a great day. Thanks, everybody.